inhibited to just remind me. So there are 12 authorities of Dharma, and they are listed in the Srimad Bhagavatam as Lord Brahma, Narada, Lord Shiva, the 4 Kumaras, Lord Kapila, who is the son of Devahuti, Swayambhuva Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janak Maharaj, Grandfather Bhishma, Bali Maharaj, Shukadev, and Yamaraj. These are the authorities of Dharma. And as we can see from the list, Grandfather Bhishma, he is listed as one of the authorities. So the question that is often asked, if Grandfather Bhishma is one of the Mahajans, and in the scripture, Srila Prabhupada always quotes this famous saying, Mahajano yena gata sapanta. One should follow the Mahajans, the authorized persons. One should always follow in the footsteps of the Mahajans. So the question that often arises then, if Bhishma Dev is one of the Mahajans, he is the authority on Dharma. Why did he take the side of the Kurus, who represented on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Adharma? So would anyone like to give their understanding of why Bhishma Dev, despite knowing the shortcomings, the problems, the irreligion of the Kuru dynasty, he still sided with them?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, I'm not too sure, but I think I've heard that Bhishma Pitama took a vow that he'll serve the throne, Kaurava dynasty. He'll serve the king.
Yes.
So he will not become a king, but then he'll serve. So because of his vows, he has to serve.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. Thank you for that, Prabhuta Mataji. So there's some context, and we know the pastime of the father of Bhishma Dev, Maharaj Shantanu. Maharaj Shantanu, he was once walking along the river Ganges. He saw a beautiful lady. He was very attracted by this lady, and he wanted to marry her. And this beautiful lady, who was Ganga Devi, she agreed to marry him on one condition, that he never questions any of her decisions. So Maharaj Shantanu, he agreed, and they married, and they had 7 children, Ganga and Maharaj Shantanu. But each child, as the child was born, Ganga would place the child in the river, and the child would be swept away, and Shantanu would never see the child again. Finally, the 8th child was born, Devarata, who later became Bhishma Dev. And when Ganga wanted to again dispose of the child, Maharaj Shantanu couldn't take it anymore. And he could no longer keep his word that he gave to Ganga Dev, not to question her. any of her actions. And he questioned her on why she was doing this, and he implored her not to do it. And the moment he did that, Ganga Devi said, I'm sorry, you have now broken your commitment. I can no longer live with you. And she left. And she took the child with her. And we know that this child was trained by the great sages. He received wonderful training from the various great sages. And he became extremely powerful, extremely knowledgeable. And there was a point in time when Maharaj Shantanu, he noticed that this child, there was a child that was in the river Ganges and was shooting his arrows and was holding the water back. I'm just trying to list out the different sages by who Devarata was trained by. Brihaspati, Shukra Acharya. Firstly, by Brihaspati, he got taught the duties of kings about political science and Shastra. And then from Shukracharya, he received training in political science and all branches of knowledge. Then from Vashishta and Chayavan, he received knowledge of the Vedas, the Vedangas. Then from Sanat Kumara, he received the mental and spiritual sciences, knowledge of that. Then from sage Markandeya, he taught him the duties of the yatis. From Parashuram, was one of his gurus, he received training in warfare. And then from Indra, he was bestowed all of the celestial weapons. And in this way, he became extremely knowledgeable, extremely powerful. So one day when Shantanu, he was roaming on the banks of the Ganga, he observed that the water of the river had turned shallow. And he saw a young man blocking the water currents with a dam made of arrows. And Shantanu immediately recognized that this young man must be my son, because he saw so many similarities in this young man with himself. And he begged Ganga to please return the son to him. And then Ganga appeared in a youthful form and handed the son to Shantanu. And Devarata, the young Devarata, he was known as Gangadatta from that point onwards. Let me just make sure that everyone's muted. Yes. And then we know the pastime, Bhishma actually means a terrible oath. And we know that Maharaj Shantanu, once he was roaming in the forest, he saw this beautiful daughter of a fisherman, Satyavati. He was very attracted by her, very taken by her, and he approached her father, asking for her hand in marriage. And the father, being very ambitious, he said that he wanted his grandchildren to become the heirs to the throne. And he knew that Shantanu already had a son. So he said, unless you can promise me that your son won't be king, but my daughter's children will be kings, I cannot give you my daughter's hand in marriage. And Maharaj Shantanu was so attached to his son, that was not something he could fulfill. And he rejected that request, and he went. But his heart was so taken up with Satyavati that he couldn't bear the separation from her. and he became completely morose and couldn't do anything. And Devarata, seeing his father in that condition, he inquired from the ministers, why is my father in this condition? And then they told him that this is the reason. And wanting not to see his father in that condition, he, at that point in time, he took this vow that he will never in his lifetime marry, meaning he would never have children who would take over the reigns as king. And when he made that vow, there was complete devastation in the kingdom. And the ministers were imploring him not to do that. But he said, no, I can't. And it is at that point in time where he took a second vow. He said that he will always see his father's image in the upcoming kings of Hastinapur. And he would serve the person who is serving as king selflessly. Whoever occupies the throne, he would do that. And he took a solemn vow that that would be his position. And he also made what is known as the third vow, where he said he will not accept death. He will not die, because when he agreed to take this lifelong vow of celibacy, he got blessed by his father at that point in time, that he would only die when he chooses to die. And he said as his third vow that he will not accept death until he could see that Hastinapur was safe from all ends. So this is the reason, despite being one of the Mahajans, we can see in the life of Bhishma Dev that he was very, very strong in his vow. He was very true to the duty that was bestowed upon him. He took it very, very seriously. And he kept this vow. And that was the reason that he stood on the side of the Kuru dynasty. He stood on the side of Dhritarashtra and his son Duryodhana. But this was just a matter of duty. Internally, his heart was with the Pandavas, because the Pandavas stood for Dharma. And here we see Prabhupada make the statement that externally, although he would seem that he blew his conch shell to cheer up Duryodhana, there was an indirect symbolism of the conch shell. Prabhupada said he informed his depressed grandson Duryodhana that he had no chance of victory in the battle because the Supreme Lord Krishna was on the other side. I must say I still haven't understood how this was translated, but we understand from a general sense, not only from the blowing of the conch shell, that Lord Krishna, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, wherever he stood, there was going to be victory. And here we see in the last statement in this Popa Prabhupada says, but still, it was his duty to conduct the fight, and no pains would be spared in that connection. And it is said on the 11th day, Grandfather Bhishma, every pore of his body was penetrated with arrows. And he fell on the bed of arrows, and he stood there for 58 days. For 58 days. And then we see the significance of the third vow, in grandfather Bhishma, waiting for that 58 days. After the battle of Kurukshetra had ended, and Maharaj Yudhishthir was crowned as the king of Hastinapur, it is said that he went through a very dark patch. It's sometimes called the dark night of the soul. And Maharaj Yudhishthir was very unhappy. He was very despondent when he thought about the millions and millions of men who were killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He held himself responsible for the deaths of so many millions of soldiers. And he thought about the wives, how many women had become widows because of the battlefield. He thought about how many children were left without a father. And in this way, he became completely despondent. In fact, he's described, he became inconsolable. Nobody, not even Lord Krishna, could remove his despondency. And it is at that point in time that Maharaj Yudhishthir, he was taken to where grandfather Bhishma was lying on the battlefield on the bed of arrows. And we see in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 9th canto of the first canto, 9th chapter, we see the passing away of Bhishma Dev. And there we see the instructions that Bhishma Dev gave to Maharaj Yudhishthir. And these instructions, they are considered to be the essence, because it is said Dharma exists in the heart of the great devotees, the Mahatmas and the Mahajans. We mentioned this previously when Maharaj Yudhishthir he met the Yaksha, and he was asked certain questions. And he said, if you could answer these questions correctly, then you would be spared from death. And he was asked some very technical questions by the Yaksha. And one of the questions he was asked was, where can we find the true religion? Where can we find the true religion? And Maharaj Yudhishthir didn't say we can find the true religion in the scriptures. It is mentioned that there are many scriptures, and sometimes the scriptures appear contradictory to each other. So Maharaj Yudhishthir, he never said the scriptures, and he said the true religion can only be found in the heart of the Mahatmas, the great souls, the great devotees of the Lord. And the Yaksha accepted Maharaj Yudhishthir's answer as to be the best, the most complete answer. So we can read in the 9th canto, the 1st canto, 9th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, the passing away of Bhishma Dev in the presence of Lord Krishna. So Bhishma Dev was a great devotee. There's one nice pastime. It is said one day Lord Krishna was in his quarters and he was deep in thought. So Maharaj Yudhishthir entered his quarters and he asked the Lord, you seem to be very deep in thought. What were you thinking about? And the Lord replied, just as Bhishma Dev is lying on the bed of arrows and he's thinking very deeply about me. In the same way, I am here And I am also thinking very deeply about Bhishma Dev. So Grandfather Bhishma is a great authority, is the great personality of Dharma. And we should always understand what his true position is. His true position was on the side of Dharma. And we can see and we can read further. Because of time limitations, we can't read chapter 9 today. But it is a very, very insightful chapter. It has 49 verses. And we can see the greatness of Grandfather Bhishma when he was about to pass away. All of the great personalities of the world were there. Lord Shiva, Narada, Kapila, Shukadev Goswami. All of the great personalities were there next to Grandfather Bhishma. He said, Parvata Muni, Narada, Domya, Vyas, Brihastasva, Bharadvaj, Parashuram, Vashishta, Indra, Pramada, Trita, Dritsamad, Asita, Kakshivan, Gotama, Atri, Kaushika, Sudarshan, Shukadev Goswami, Kashyap, Angirasa, and all of the disciples arrived there when Grandfather Bhishma was about to pass away. Why did they arrive? What was the main reason? The main reason was they came to hear from Grandfather Bhishma. Because real Dharma sits in the heart of these great personalities. And when they speak only true Dharma. So we can hear that speech, that advice, or those instructions that Grandfather Bhishma gave to Maharaj Yudhisthira. If you do not have Srimad Bhagavatam, you can contact us and you can get a set. And in this way, you read further about Grandfather Bhishma. So it's now almost 12:30. We'll stop here. We'll take any questions, comments, reflections, or additions that anyone may have.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, my pranam to you.
Hare Krishna, Puja Mataji, my pranam to you too.
Yes, it took a long time, isn't it? Because the war finished after 18 days.
Yes.
And he stayed like that for nearly 40 days after the war was over.
Yes.
So was it the time that when Yudhishthira got being made the king, and after that they came back? But 40 days lying like that, such a long time.
Yes, Mataji. He stood there for a few reasons. One particular reason was he wanted to instruct. He wanted to instruct Maharaj Yudhisthira.
Yeah.
And what was your question, Mataji? Maybe I missed out. I was just trying to make sure that I got
Yes, I said
right.
40 days after the war was over,
Yes.
he was left alone there.
Yes.
The battlefield. That's
Yeah.
very sad, isn't it? I know he waited for the religion to be re-established.
Yes.
And that was because of the job of Yudhishthira.
Yes.
But still 40 days.
Yes. 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 So I guess your question would be, why would you let him suffer
Yes.
so long?
I know he had his own will that he could die only when he wanted to die. So
yes,
there must be reason for him to stay like that for 40 days.
Yes.
So that's what I'm asking.
The main reason he wanted to fix his consciousness on Lord Krishna.
Okay.
And the other reason obviously was he wanted to instruct Maharaj Yudhisthira, and he wanted to establish Dharma by his instructions to Maharaj Yudhisthira. So that's some of the main reasons. And then when at the end he was able to fix his consciousness on Lord Krishna, then he departed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
question, I was trying to remember why Ganga Devi put the babies in the river. Was it to relieve them from a curse? Is that what?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
There's a story about King Shantanu in his previous life, and maybe I could just quickly, if I can find it. It is said here, once the celestial Vasus and their wives were enjoying themselves in the forest, when the wife of, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Dayu, he spotted, and Dayu was Maharaj Shantanu in his previous life, right? He spotted an excellent cow and asked, and the wife of Dayu spotted an excellent cow and asked her husband to steal it. The cow was Nandini, the daughter of the wish-fulfilling cow Surabhi, and was owned by the sage Vashishta. With the help of his brothers, Dayu tried to steal it, but Vashishta caught them and cursed them to be born as mortals and suffer a terrible life. Upon their pleading, Vashishta showed mercy and told the other 7 Vasus that they would be liberated soon after their birth. However, Dayu, being the protagonist of the theft, was cursed to endure a longer life on earth. Before the birth of her sons, Ganga was requested to kill the 7 children soon after her birth. So that's the reason. There's some pastime to do that with the 7 Vasus, Mataji, and that's why the seven children were killed first. That is the history that we read in the Shastras.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go on.
Okay, Chandra Chaitanya Prabhu, you first, then Rupa Mataji, and then maybe Joli Mataji. I'm not sure.
Thank you very much for a wonderful session.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yes, grandfather Bhishma personified Dharma, and at that time, that was the right thing to do. So if I can draw an analogy, our grandfather is Prabhupada, and he also upheld Dharma, but he came in this very special yuga when the Lord came down as the most magnificent avatar, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he has shown us the Dharma of chanting, feasting, and going back to Godhead. So our Dharma has sort of become simplified in that sense. But yes, Grandfather Bhishma personified proper Dharma, because that last instructions he gave to Yudhishthira Maharaj on the deathbed was really wonderful. That is why all those wonderful devotees had gathered to hear. Thank you, Prabhu. That's my small realization.
That's a very nice realization, Chandra Chaitanya Prabhu, and it is completely in line with Shastra. And Srila Prabhupada, being the Acharya, he personifies Dharma. And we see Prabhupada, he translated the Srimad Bhagavatam. And in translating the Srimad Bhagavatam, he gave his Bhaktivedanta purports to the 9th chapter of the 1st canto. So we see in Srila Prabhupada, he is expanding upon that same Dharma that was spoken by Grandfather Bhishma Dev on the battlefield or during his final days. And Srila Prabhupada has made that Dharma relevant to the current age through his purports. So you said something very, very significant there, Chandra Chaitanya Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare
My
Krishna.
humble obeisances to you.
Please accept
Thank you
mine.
for a wonderful class. My question will be like a bit of the Mahabharata or the Vedic times. During the Vedic times, Varnashrama was practiced. Why were polygamy and patriarchy prevalent within the Varnashrama? And there will be like sub questions like women must have suffered because of that, and were the Varnas only for men?
So your question is were the Varnas just for men? And
Yeah.
basically what you're asking is, were women outside the Varna ashram system?
No, like in the ashram, obviously Grihastha ashram will
Yes.
have the woman in it.
Yes.
And also before marriage, she will be like a, brahmachari, celibate or whatever.
Yes.
But the varnas, like the
Varna.
kshatriya, women won't be fighting, so or she won't be involved in administration. So kshatriya, then brahmanas, wife can be there, but again, teaching shastras, women won't be there. So Brahman, Kshatriya, women won't be, even Vaishya, the business also, women won't be doing it. So were women outside the Varna system?
Were women outside the Varna system? Not necessarily so. Generally, it was considered the woman was in the same Varna as their husband.
Okay.
Although they did not act, so to speak, but because, it is said the woman is the better half of the husband, or at least she shares half of the benefit of the husband. So generally the woman would follow the Varna of the husband. So it is not necessary they were outside the Varna system. It is just that they followed the Varna of the husband.
Okay. And why were polygamy and patriarchy prevalent in the Varnashram system?
Okay. Generally, it is said in the Vedic literature, in the world population, there is more women than men. Nowadays, we see that even more prevalent. If you look at the statistics of the various countries, we will see that there are more women than men. Vedic culture says that women should always be protected. In their youth, they are protected by the father. In the middle to latter part of their life, they're protected by the husband. And when the husband takes sannyas or pass away, then she's protected by the son. So Vedic culture means at all stages of life, women are always afforded protection. And to be protected by the husband means women must always be married. So if there's more women than men, and women must always be married, logically it follows that the only way you can reconcile that is if one man accepts more than one wife. That is one point. And the second point is, unlike today, where we consider if a man has more than one wife, it is not a very good situation, because generally in Kali Yuga, a man struggles even to maintain one wife, just because how the situation is. But in previous times, it was well within the means of a man to have more than one wife, sometimes to maintain more than one residence for each wife, and to provide amply for each wife. And there would be no quarrel or friction between the wives. It was just well accepted. The wives were happy that they had a husband to protect them, and they were taken care of. So that was the Vedic system, and therefore polygamy in those times was not considered to be unjust, unfair, or something that didn't make sense. Does that answer your question, Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji. And I'm thinking in modern times, like we see so many leaders of the world, prominent leaders of the world, they are like divorcing and marrying or having a partner. So it's like giving the alimony to the first wife, and having, so it is like polygamy, but obviously because they can't have polygamy, they're divorcing and marrying again. So it is kind of something.
Yeah, everything becomes perverted. When there's no polygamy. So people do it in, how can I say, through the back door or through illicit ways, and the women suffer. At the end of the day, the women suffer the most. Whereas in the Vedic system through polygamy, there was proper balance. There was proper balance.
Okay, thank you very
Hare
much.
Krishna.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Also,
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, I also feel that women were not like a weaker sex in those days, because if you see the example of Draupadi, she had 5 husbands.
Mhm.
So it was not like men were marrying multiple wives. Draupadi is a documented example.
Mhm.
But it was, by looking at her story, you could clearly see that it was an equal status for both the sexes.
Mhm. Yes.
That's what I feel we see from Draupadi's.
Yes. You know, it is oftentimes considered that the women during Vedic times, they were more subjugated than women are now. They're given more freedom, but that's not the reality. They were given very high status, and they were very respected women. And as you said, they were very, very strong women, very, very strong in character in those Vedic times.
Prabhuji, Draupadi's case was accidental, isn't it? Because she was married to
Yes.
Arjuna married Draupadi, and Arjuna came to Kunti Devi and said, "Mom, I have got some news for you." And then she, without knowing what it was, she said, "Share it between your brothers."
Yes.
And that's how it happened.
So her case is very unique. It's certainly you know, not something that was
Common.
propagated. Yeah, it was not really, you know, something that was the norm within Vedic culture.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Jolly Mataji.
I just hope this is not out of tone. It's just struck a chord about the 40 days that Puja Mataji in Christianity, they have a story about the flood, 40 days. And Krishna is connected with all religions. So I just wondered if there was a significance there.
I'm not sure, Jolly Mataji, you could be right, but having not studied that particular reference you're giving to in Christianity, it's difficult to say. Could be right. Maybe someone else who has more knowledge about the subject can comment on it. Sometimes there are significance in numbers, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it could be. Anyway, I'm just wondering. It's not a a fact I find anywhere else. And just also about the many wives. There is a sect in America that believe in having many wives, one, and for the same reason, because of overloading of women and men. I shouldn't say overloading, but more women. I wondered if anybody had that thought as well.
Yeah, I also read or I saw a documentary some time ago about that sect.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they do it for the same reason.
The
or
Mormons, I think it's the Mormons, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the principle is protection and it makes and keeps women happier and more protected and secure, then it's
and not much jealousy and envy going on. Well, hopefully not.
But the trouble is the quality of men in Kali Yuga is so poor, Jolly Mataji.
Yeah.
That it's so difficult to find men who would have many wives and uphold dharma. Generally in Kali Yuga, the problem is never with the women, it's more with the men. Yeah, you don't have qualified men.
I suppose all the men were killed in the battle, all the millions.
Yes. In fact, we will read in chapter 1, Arjuna will give many reasons why he does not want to fight. And one of the reasons he gives is called Vana Sankara. He says, if we have this battle, many men will be killed. And many men will be killed means many women would be without husbands. And When they are without husbands, they are prone to exploitation. And when they are exploited, the
Yeah.
byproduct of exploitation is unwanted progeny. Arjuna actually says that. Gives one of the reasons in the Bhagavad Gita first chapter, which we'll read later on.
Hare Krishna, very
Hare
good.
Krishna.
Yeah. Good reason.
All right, dear devotees, if there's no more, oh, Krishnavani Mataji, you've got some comment or question, Mataji?
Yeah, one comment to add about Bhishma Pitamaha's why he stayed longer.
Mm-hmm.
He was also waiting for the right, the what you call the stars.
Constellation, yes.
Yeah, like
the constellation.
Uttarayan. So when the sun, moves into the north or something. So
Yes, that's an important point you make. Actually, in the Vedic calendar, the day that the grandfather Bhishma passes away, it is celebrated and observed in the Vedic calendar as a very, very auspicious occasion. One is because it's the passing away of grandfather Bhishma, and secondly, also he passed away in such an auspicious constellation. Therefore, the passing away of grandfather Bhishma is observed so much in Vedic times. Thank you for that, Krishnavani Mataji.
He was a yogi, and the yogis, they for the exact time, perfect time to leave his body. So that's what I heard. I don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah, he achieved everything. The most important one, he was able to fix his mind and vision on Lord Krishna when he passed away, and there's nothing greater than that.
Mm.
Yeah. And he did it during the right constellation too.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll finish off with Vaishnava Pranam, Vancha Kalpa Turubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai,
Jai.
the Prabhupada ki jai,
Jai.
Premanande.
Hare Krishna.